Despite all of the great things I told you about being at an R1 university, most of the instructors that you have never had a job outside of a university. So what we're going to tell you about here is it's not that we don't know what we're talking about, it's that we haven't experienced what we're talking about. So what I did is I did what I do know how to do, and that is to conduct some interviews, go out and do some research, and tell you what it is that I think will help you find and succeed in an internship. And I have to admit some biases here, that I come from a STEM background, but I think what I'm going to tell you about is relevant to any type of internship, whether it is in policy or government or in publishing or any other type of career opportunity. All right. So what is an internship and why would you want to get one? It offers a structured work experience. An internship is a form of structured, often temporary, pretty much always temporary, work experience that allows students or recent graduates to gain hands-on skills in a professional setting. There are usually learning objectives. So there are some like internships, we call them bad internships, where they just kind of put the intern in a closet and say, okay, 10 weeks, do something and go, and provide very little in the way of professional development. And if you see if it looks like that's the kind of internship that you're applying for, then maybe you don't want to apply for it. There should be a learning objective. So the focus is on training and learning specific objectives, which can include soft skills like teamwork, as well as technical skills relevant to the field. There are varied durations. Internships can last anywhere from a few weeks to several months, and many may be part-time or full-time, depending on the employer and the intern's availability. They can also be paid or unpaid. Some internships are paid, offering stipends or hourly wages, while others may be unpaid but offer other forms of compensation like learning experiences, networking opportunities, or academic credit. Internships are often pathways to employment. So internships serve as a way for the company or the organization to see how it is you work in a structured environment. And then what they're really trying to do during the hiring process is de-risk you as an applicant. That will come up a lot because employers have a lot of choice, although things are kind of going into the employees' advantage lately, especially ever since COVID. But in general, there are more applicants for a job than they can take. And what they are trying to do to a large extent is not expose themselves to risk, because they're investing a lot of money in this position, and they want to make sure that that the tasks get completed and that the value is commensurate or more with the money that they're paying for it. So in this presentation, I'm going to report on my findings over the last week in discussing with people in the private sector. And then if we have time, I will go through some more precise ways and campus resources that you might want to go to find an internship, but it is also very likely that will be your discussion topic for next week in your discussions, in which and I'll share those slides with your discussion leaders. Okay, so I'm doing this anonymously. B is a computer engineer with 20 years in a multinational med tech company, now working as an independent consultant for the last 2 years. And this person, I've known them for 22 years, and I trust what they're saying. And you can see that B really went above and beyond. A good friend, really helped me out here. D is not me. D is another D, a mechanical engineer working in one of the world's largest aerospace companies. And then DL is me, and I'm the Associate Dean for Students in Engineering. I have played a role in hiring for research, teaching assistants, and student affairs, many of which could be considered internship type, temporary employment type responsibilities. Okay, what are some broad strokes? Much of what applies to finding, winning, and succeeding at an internship is applicable to full-time jobs as well. Your goal in finding an internship or a full-time job is a creative outlet, a sense of purpose, and financial security. You will not get everything you apply for, and applying for jobs and applying for internships is an exercise in humility. Even as a tenured full professor and associate dean for students, much less than, many less than half of the grant proposals I ever submit get funded. Papers, when you submit them to high profile journals, they often get rejected. I often make offers to candidates for graduate school and postdocs, and they don't decide to come work for me or work in my lab. So rejection is just kind of part of life. But rejection is almost a necessity because if you don't get rejected and get rejected a bunch of times, you're not taking enough risks. There's this truism in hospitality management where if you're running a hotel, you don't want to have 100% occupancy because that means you're leaving money on the table. It means that people were willing to pay a higher rate for that hotel room, but you don't know how much more there was to achieve. So a good rate might be 95% occupancy, which means you're charging just enough so that people will still fill most of the hotel, but you're not hitting that wall, right, of 100% where there might be more more value to be collected for the services that you're providing. Same thing goes in applying for stuff and eventually getting rejected from it. If you got everything you applied for, then perhaps you're not taking enough risk. So rejection in that sense is just what that looks like. It's what a good, healthy confidence looks like when you apply for jobs and you get rejected from them. Mutual fit is really important. So they're not just interviewing you, but you're interviewing them. And most people will not get the job, but consider that most people are sending out more than one application. Most people that get the job had to iterate their approach. So if you're applying for a job or an internship for the first time, you're going in the pool with people who have applied multiple times. And they sometimes call this sort of like the treadmill effect where you're putting in the effort, but you are getting like the experience and your application does improve over time. In my own field of grant writing, when I look on Twitter or something, or X, and I see that other professors are complaining about the grant funding rate, which might be like 15%, and 85% of grant proposals are rejected. And it's like, oh, that's so bad, that's so bad. But those 15% were part of that 85% several times before. So it's more like it's that game, way too many analogies, sorry. But there's a game at carnivals or in Chuck E. Cheese where you put the quarter in and there's this sweeper that pushes that quarter and there's a whole bunch of quarters here. And when the quarter or coin or token pushes forward, some of those quarters at the end could fall out and go into the into the bin where they become yours, right? So where was I going with that? Yeah, so it's like you got to start at the beginning, right, and keep putting those quarters in, and eventually your interview experience and your ability to make a persuasive argument in a cover letter will improve and improve and improve. So you just have to do it. Just have to do it. Don't mistake laziness for malice. So this is a rejection coping strategy that if you don't get the job and say there were 10 other applicants or 100 other applicants and they only had room for 1 or 10 interns or something in that organization, and say, you know, they were lazy. Maybe they didn't read your whole cover letter. Maybe you had something in there that they just didn't see that, oh, you know, it would have been perfect. My application for this internship would have been perfect if only they saw that one piece. Maybe they didn't. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe it was laziness on their part and they didn't see that information. Another way in which employers are lazy is the networking effect. And we hear about this word networking, and it's like, I don't know, kind of a tech bro-y type word. It's like, everyone's got a network. You got to network. And from the standpoint of the employer, hiring somebody that you already know kind of de-risks the process. I mean, it leads to a lot of sociological externalities and knock-on effects which are not so good, like homogenization of the workforce and so on. But that is really a manifestation of risk aversion, that people are, if they know somebody, they've met somebody before at a conference or at a job fair or something, and they're like, okay, that person is going to be, I already know that person, they're going to do well, they'll have a high likelihood of doing well in this job. And then finally, if you get rejected, this is kind of an inverse of, I think, a quote that Rodney Dangerfield said, where Rodney Dangerfield was this kind of gruff, self-deprecating comedian in the 50s and 60s. And he said, I wouldn't want to be in a club that would have me as a member, where the club would have someone like him, that it must not be good enough. But the opposite is that's a joke, but the converse, or whatever the logic statement is true. You don't want to be a part of a club that wouldn't have you as a member. You just don't. So if you get turned away from that internship, don't stress overly about it. All right, so I reached out to my friends in private industry, and I asked them, what skills or qualities do you look for when hiring interns? D says problem solving, learning from mistakes. Okay. B will elaborate on this idea. I say the big three are reliability, curiosity, and experience, in that order. Now, reliability, you can't really have one. It doesn't work if you have a 0 for any of these, except maybe experience. But experience could be a lot of things. You don't need to be experienced in exactly the area or the industry that you are working in. Maybe classroom experience or a project is enough. But you really do have to show evidence of reliability, that you're going to be there on time, that you're going to follow deadlines. Curiosity, especially in any, basically in any knowledge work whatsoever, curiosity is going to be a hugely important characteristic. And you can't just say, yeah, I'm reliable and I'm curious. You have to be able to provide evidence for it. B, bless B, always has super long answers, but there's a lot of insight here. I look for essentially all of the same things that I would for a full-time position, just minus the experience part. In general, these interns would be helping out on a software engineering project, on an agile Scrum team with 3 or 4 other software engineers, and maybe a test engineer. The intern would usually get some somewhat well-defined part of the project to own throughout the summer, while sitting in the same area as the rest of the team, not shoved away in a closet somewhere, and with help, guidance from me and other team members. So that said, I look mainly for, and the next couple slides are all be expanding on these points. Problem-solving ability. Maybe obvious, but important, and maybe something people don't like to admit because this is not something you can work on all that much, unfortunately, or practice for an interview. And I think what he's talking about is problem-solving ability that comes out in just the way you're talking to the interviewer. But I would say that you can practice. You can practice for this. If you're smart and know how to figure things out, that works in place of experience. I will ask some problem-solving questions in the interview, especially related to software, but sometimes even not. I really like B's point. They talk about it later. Interest in making things. B, I have the sense that there are a lot of people these days that go into software engineering, or insert whatever field you want here, because, quote, it's a good career path. Maybe they were encouraged by parents, etc. But I don't want those people as much as the people who naturally enjoy making things and have a natural interest in doing so. If I see anything on someone's resume about building software for fun, outside of some other internship, etc., I will always ask about it, and it is a very positive sign for me. I do this for full-time candidates too. I find that people are hesitant to put, quote, non-professional projects on their resume though, but for me, very big plus. I will also always ask about senior design projects and the candidate's role in the team. I find that to be pretty revealing. If you are going into a journalism internship or a policy internship, you can basically make one-to-one substitutions for software engineering in this quote. Suppose you wrote for a school newspaper, or suppose you had a newsletter on a topic that you did and no one asked you to do it. Suppose you had a YouTube channel or a couple of YouTube videos or a blog, if that's still a thing that people do. These are all really, really positive attributes, or really positive experiences that will definitely help, almost more so than academic work, because no one asked you to do it. It was purely a result of your own agency. And everybody has something like that. Good teamwork and communication skills. Not too much to say about this, but it is super important. If you're shy during the interview, that's fine for me, but I don't want someone who is arrogant or difficult to work with. If that's the case, I don't care how smart you are, etc. And then I say, just to emphasize this point, I've gotten rid of people who create a toxic environment or are overly, quote, looking out for number one. Looking out for number one means behaving selfishly. Question number 2, how do you typically find or recruit interns, and how far ahead of time? B says, I think we would probably start looking in February or so. This raised a bit of a red flag for me. I think this is idiosyncratic to that particular company, and I'll talk more in a second, for summer interns starting in May, but can't really remember exactly. I think, let's see, springtime for a summer internship is when they start seeing who wants an intern, and then I would say for most software type jobs, it's much earlier, like fall. Interestingly, B is a software person, but the industry is in biomedical devices. So the person so the schedule actually follows the hardware side of things as opposed to the software side of things, even though this person worked in a software job. I would say that in other fields that are more, there are things like the AAAS, that is American Association for the Advancement of Science, internship program that's sometime probably in the late fall. But a lot of companies that are doing non-software, I'm going to put in the winter, late winter, early spring category. But software, if you folks in computer science, math, statistics, things that will tend to be where you'll be looking for internships in that type of area, think earlier, think like now. Can you describe, this is question number 3, can you describe a project that interns successfully completed? B says, one project was developing a graphical test tool that ran on a Windows PC that would communicate with USB-based sensor devices designed to connect to a patient monitor, such as for oxygen saturation, invasive blood pressure, etc. The test tool kind of acted as a stand-in for the patient monitor and could display numeric values, real-time waveforms, etc., and could also send commands to the sensor devices. The tool was written in blah, 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 blah. Some of you will know what that means. I don't. B continues, the larger project team was developing a new communications protocol which medical device manufacturers outside our company would use in developing their sensor devices to connect to our patient monitor. And so this graphical tool and a bunch of other things were packaged up in a software development kit, which went out to these third-party companies to help them build their sensor devices and conform to our new communications protocol. This was the, quote, main project for the intern, but he also contributed to other team-based things going on during the summer. So a lot of times there are projects in any organization, where they're the perfect bite-sized chunk for a 10-week job for somebody with most of a bachelor's degree, half to most of a bachelor's degree, but for which the main team of full-time employees is working towards some big picture goal, and although this thing is important, they can't divert their attention to doing it. That's like the perfect internship project. Those are the types of projects that in my research lab we hire interns for in terms of senior design projects. So we'll hire teams of students in different majors for senior design. So I can kind of empathize with what B is talking about here. And outside of computer, like computer engineering, you can imagine, or computer science, or biomedical devices, you could imagine in, say, policy or finance, that there's a bunch of data that needs to be collated. It's in disparate sources, it's scattered. We need it all placed into a spreadsheet, and someone needs to make sense out of what we see here. That's another example of a contained project with a goal where you can do it with most of a bachelor's degree. What are some common mistakes that interns make, either in the interview process or once on the job? B, on the job, one thing I've seen is interns being hesitant to ask for help / ask questions. I assume they don't want to bother, quote, the professionals, but one secret is that, quote, the professionals often don't know what they are doing. There is a lot of learning and communication that has to happen on the job, and interacting with teammates is important. We had a strong team-based environment at our company, though I also know of many other internships where interns get, quote, shoved in a closet. There's that shoving in a closet thing again, and are expected to produce something at the end. Maybe try avoiding these kinds of internships if you at all can. Good advice. How often do interns get a full-time job offer? B, we offered 3 out of 3 interns full-time job offers. We had good interns. Again, we bothered to spend a fair amount of effort in finding good ones in the interview process. D, for successful interns, do well during the internship. When working on a project, do what you say you're going to do. Be reliable. This word, reliability, comes up a lot. Consider the internship as a long-term interview that is relatively inexpensive for the company. And my 2 cents here is in student affairs, and less often since finding a full-time job in student affairs is not usually the goal, but in the research lab, around 30% of my PhD students started as undergraduate interns. Number 6, what advice would you give someone preparing to interview for an internship? B, I suppose I would say to just try to relax. Has anyone ever told you to relax? Has it ever succeeded in making you actually relax? No. I suppose I would say try to relax, be yourself. I'm being a little glib, but there are definitely things you can do that will take the edge off a little bit. You know, going for a walk, having some kind of routine, doing some sort of contemplative practice if you're down for that kind of thing, and so on. Be yourself and show that you are interested in making stuff and working with people, and hopefully that is true. If an interviewer asks you problem-solving questions, like a coding question, don't feel that you have to, quote, just get to the right answer off the bat. You should talk through your thought process too. This goes for anything, not just a computer science, computer engineering type job. Think about the problem. Think out loud. Say what your assumptions are. The best kinds of problem-solving interviews to really like increase your think on your feetedness about this are the management consulting interviews. And they'll ask you some ridiculous question, but it's sort of like if you can do those, you can do any interview question. It's like, how many seagulls are flying on Earth right now? Right now, this moment. How much money did AMC Theaters chain make today? And they don't have to be quantitative too. Like, what makes Beethoven different from Mozart? I don't know, making stuff up, but talk about your thought process. Talk about, even if you don't know anything about that stuff, you just start saying stuff and you'll get partial credit, just like on an exam. D, have examples of projects you work, oh wait, I'm not done with B yet. Don't feel like you have to talk through your thought process. This shows that you know how to communicate and work with other people to get to a solution. Yeah, you could ask them questions. You know, don't let the interviewer be an interrogator, right? That's why we have 2 different words for those 2 different activities. Like you can ask the interviewer questions, especially to clarify. D, have examples of projects you worked on and how they influence your learning. Know how you approach problems / be able to describe your problem-solving process. So problem solving comes up over and over and over again. This is what I would say. Be prepared to show evidence of your reliability, curiosity, and experience. I think that curiosity and problem solving are related in a way. I think that if you can be curious about why something is the way it is, you can also be curious about ways that you might determine why something is the way it is. Number 7, do you have any preferred majors or academic backgrounds for your interns? No surprise there. B says software engineering or computer science. D says aerospace or mechanical engineering. And I say for undergrad researchers, no experience is required, but time management along with other responsibilities and coursework is a key attribute. It's also something that you can provide evidence for. There is a lot of talk about the over-reliance on GPA in determining job placement and internships and so on. GPA says some things. It's not an end-all, be-all metric, but one thing it is useful in at least providing some insight into is time management, especially if you combine the GPA information along with whatever other work or extracurricular or co-curricular responsibilities that somebody had. In a job interview, they are not legally allowed to ask you about family. You can volunteer it, but they can't ask you about it. And if you have kids, they can't ask you, but if someone were to throw that in there, that would be, and they still managed to do these extra co-curricular things or had this internship or whatever, that would be a huge plus for me because that shows time management and responsibility and maturity. Number 8, what's one thing that makes an intern stand out once on the job? B, a good attitude and getting things done and not letting problems, quote, fester, which might include asking for help. D, being able to think critically. DL, it's me, being proactive and anticipatory of problems, anticipating problems, or in recognizing opportunities, seeking help when needed. So I think that this is almost true of any job, where the people who get the jobs and the people who succeed in getting them and get promoted are the ones that can kind of see into the future a little bit and anticipate problems and showing the people that they work with that, you know, this is on the horizon or there's an opportunity here. Let's try to do it. Or if you are somebody's direct report and somebody asks and they ask you to do a job and you know you get no points if it's late, you get the normal amount of points if it's on time, and you get an additional amount of bonus points if maybe there's some value add, some insight in it that maybe they didn't even know was there. So with that, I'm going to stop this part of the presentation, and actually what I'm going to do is give the resources that I have and the rest of the slide deck to your discussion leaders to use as a basis of discussion next week. But what I'm going to do now is just talk about anything that I've said during lecture. So any questions?